The chamber echoed with the sharp crack of the gavel as High Arbiter Vexer slammed it down, his multifaceted eyes gleaming under the holographic lights that cast a cold, azure glow across the obsidian table. The air hummed with the subtle vibrations of anticipation, the scent of polished chitin and ionized air thick in the enclosed space. "The vote is unanimous," he declared, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction, the sound reverberating like the first stirrings of a swarm. War on the human world. Their insolence ends today. Around the table, the Council of the United Hive stirred with a low buzz of approval, their exoskeletons shifting in unison, a collective ripple of chitinous armor that spoke of long-suppressed aggression, finally unleashed. Vexer, ever the strategist with his calculating patience honed over countless cycles, leaned back in his harness, the straps creaking faintly under his weight. He scanned the faces of his peers, noting the subtle cues in their postures and the twitch of their antennae. There was Lyra, the fleet commander, her exoskeleton scarred from a dozen campaigns across the fringes of known space, radiating unyielding confidence that bordered on arrogance. Her crest spines were erect, a sign of her readiness to lead the vanguard into the fray. Beside her sat Torak, the resource minister, his tendrils twitching with greed at the mere thought of the human tech to plunder. Those crude but ingenious alloys and energy matrices that could bolster the Hive's forges for generations. And then there was Krell, the youngest among them, whose impulsive fire had tipped the scales in favor of this declaration. His arguments about human expansion into Hive space still rang in their auditory slits, passionate and unyielding, painting the soft skins as an existential threat that could no longer be ignored. Vexer rose slowly, his voice slicing through the murmurs like a plasma blade through flesh, commanding silence without effort. "We strike first at Epsilon Station, their frontier outpost on the edge of the red dust world. Lyra, mobilize the vanguard swarm without delay. No mercy for these soft-skinned upstarts who dare encroach on our domains." As he spoke, the central hologram flickered to life with a soft chime, projecting a detailed wireframe of the station in high orbit around the dusty red planet below. Its modular structure rotated slowly in the projection, human defenders marked as insignificant blips of red light amid the vastness of space, their positions predictable and vulnerable, according to the latest intelligence feeds. Lyra nodded curtly, her claws tapping rapid commands into her personal console, the interface responding with a series of affirming beeps. Her mind was already leaping ahead, calculating trajectories and swarm patterns. "My drones will be there in hours, slicing through their defenses like thorns through silk. Their shields won't hold against concentrated plasma volleys from the lances." She paused, her compound eyes shifting to Torak with a pointed glance, her voice carrying the weight of logistical necessity. "Resources for the push? We cannot afford delays in resupply if this drags." "Plenty to spare," Torak rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper laced with anticipation, his eyes narrowing into slits of avarice as he envisioned the spoils. "The core worlds will supply whatever is needed. Fuel cells, munitions, reinforcement hulls. This war feeds itself. The human alloys we seize will replenish our forges tenfold, turning their own ingenuity against them." Krell leaned forward eagerly, his voice edged with the raw excitement of youth, his mandibles parting slightly to reveal the gleam of his inner fangs. "We've watched them for cycles, bickering among their fractured alliances, splintering their unity at every turn. They'll crumble like dry soil under our advance, scattered and leaderless." Vexer silenced them all with a single raised claw, the gesture authoritative and final, the chamber falling into a respectful hush broken only by the faint hum of the hologram. The Hive had tolerated human encroachment for far too many cycles, their primitive ships nipping at trade routes like pests, probing the edges of Hive territory with increasing boldness. But the latest raid on a vital mining outpost, where human raiders had slaughtered workers and stolen irreplaceable crystal deposits, had crossed an unforgivable line. Retaliation was not just demanded. It was inevitable. War would be swift and total. A cleansing swarm that would purge the frontier of this upstart species. He could already imagine the Council's legacy etched into towering victory obelisks on the homeworld, their names revered for generations. As the session adjourned with a chorus of affirming clicks and the scraping of harnesses against the floor, Vexer lingered at the table, his gaze fixed on the hologram's persistent glow. The station pulsed with life signs, thousands of humans aboard oblivious to the storm gathering in the void. A flicker of doubt stirred in the depths of his mind, unbidden and unwelcome, like a shadow in the underhive. No, he dismissed it swiftly. It was merely the thrill of inevitability, the certainty of the hive's dominance. With a decisive motion, he activated the broadcast relay, his claw pressing the activation rune. The chamber's speakers thrummed to life, carrying his voice across the sectors. To all sectors, the purge begins. Mobilize and converge for the hive. Hours later, aboard the lead cruiser Stingwing, Lyra paced the bridge with measured strides, her boots echoing softly against the grated deck. Her sub-commanders stood arrayed in a tight semicircle before her, their postures rigid with anticipation, antennae quivering in the dim red light of the alert stations. Alarms hummed steadily as the warp drive spooled up, the ship vibrating with the building energy that promised swift transit through the stars. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a command lance. "Jump in 30 cycles," one sub-commander replied promptly, his antennae quivering with focus as he monitored the drive readings. Human patrols are scattered across the sector, none detected near the target vector. Approach is clear. Good. Arm all lances and prepare drone swarms for immediate deployment. Lyra's mind raced through the tactical formations she had drilled into her crews. Envelop the station from multiple angles, breach the outer hull with precision strikes, and extract the data cores containing their frontier expansion plans. It was a simple operation on paper, elegant in its efficiency. The humans fought with fire and fury, driven by their chaotic passions, but without the unity of the hive. They were little more than prey awaiting the swarm. The ship lurched suddenly into warp, the stars outside the viewport streaking into brilliant lines of light as reality folded around them. Lyra allowed herself a rare smile, her mandibles parting slightly in a gesture of predatory satisfaction. Victory here would silence the dissenters back on the homeworld. Those cautious voices in the lower echelons who still whispered of negotiation and coexistence, as if equals could be bargained with. War was the hive's true language, forged in the fires of survival, and the humans would learn it intimately, their cries echoing through the void. But as the Stingwing dropped out of warp with a shuddering jolt, the sensors erupted in a cacophony of alarms, red warnings flooding the tactical displays. Epsilon Station loomed ahead in the viewport, larger than anticipated but not as the isolated outpost of their intelligence briefings. Its docking arms bristled with unfamiliar vessels, human reinforcements cobbled together from freighters and mining rigs, their hulls crudely patched with asteroid debris and reinforced plating, turning the once vulnerable station into a makeshift fortress. Lyra's claws dug into the edge of her console, gouging faint scratches into the metal as shock rippled through her. "What is this?" Intel said it was isolated, a soft target ripe for the taking. "They're arming torpedoes across the board," a sub-commander hissed urgently, his voice laced with alarm as he parsed the incoming data streams. "Shields at full power, and look, they've mined the primary approach vector with proximity charges. It's a kill zone." Krell's voice crackled over the comms link from the council chamber back on the homeworld, insistent and brash. "Push through. Overwhelm them with numbers. Show no hesitation." Lyra hesitated for a fraction of a second, her tactical mind weighing the risks, then snarled an order that sent her bridge crew into motion. "Flank left immediately. Drones, clear the mines, full swarm deployment." The vanguard surged forward, plasma blooms erupting in the void as drones streaked toward the hazards, detonating charges in brilliant flashes that lit the space around the station. But the humans didn't scatter as expected. They held their ground with a tenacity that bordered on madness. A bulky freighter belched a massive cloud of decoys into the path of the advancing drones, drawing fire and wasting precious munitions while railguns mounted on the station punched clean holes through the leading edge of the Kreller vanguard. Explosions rippled across the fleet's formation, silent in the vacuum but devastating in their impact, debris fields expanding like fractured jewels. Lyra's bridge shook violently as a human torpedo grazed the Stingwing's shields, the inertial dampeners straining to compensate. "Evasive maneuvers! Regroup the line, do not let them dictate the engagement." Sweat beaded under her exoskeleton, a rare discomfort. This wasn't the swift purge she had envisioned. It was a trap, meticulously laid, and the human's adaptability was already unraveling the hive's carefully laid plans. Back on the homeworld in the shadowed council chamber, Bexer watched the live feed with growing intensity. his composure cracking like thin ice under pressure. The holographic display flickered with real-time updates, casualty icons blinking out one by one. The humans had anticipated the strike. Somehow, impossibly, they had foreseen the hive's move. How spies? Lucky guesswork. The Council's war, so neatly voted into existence amid the glow of victory simulations, now bled in vivid, unrelenting detail before his eyes. He gripped the edge of the table, his claws leaving deep gouges in the obsidian surface. Send the reserves immediately. Reinforce Lyra's position. Do not let this falter. But deep in his core, a whisper grew louder. Regret, sharp and insistent as a stinger's barb piercing flesh. Questioning the haste of their declaration, Vexer paced the chamber's shadowed alcove, the holographic display flickering erratically with fresh casualty reports that scrolled like wounds across his vision. His mandibles clicked in agitation, each update a fresh sting against the Council's grand vision of swift dominance. Epsilon Station orbited their outer colony like a thorn embedded in chitin, supposedly a ripe symbol of human expansionist overreach, an easy prize to shatter and claim. Yet here it was, transforming the assault into a grinding maw of attrition, devouring resources and resolve alike. Admiral Lyra reports shield integrity at 60%. The COEMS officer droned in a monotonous buzz, her voice devoid of inflection but heavy with implication as she relayed the data. Human countermeasures are adapting faster than our projections anticipated. Their decoys are mimicking our drone signatures with eerie precision, drawing fire and preserving their core defenses. Vexer's compound eyes narrowed on the feed, focusing on a particular human vessel, squat and unassuming, darting through the expanding debris field with scarred hull plates but unyielding determination. No elegant curves like the sleek designs of the Kreller fleet, just brute efficiency, layers of armor welded in haste from whatever scraps they could scavenge. It evaded plasma lances with rolls that defied prediction, turning the chaos of battle into an ally. He slammed a claw down on the console, the impact sending a tremor through the interface. What of our reserves? The second wave should have breached their outer perimeter by now, providing the push we need. The officer hesitated, her exoskeleton rattling faintly with unease, antennae drooping slightly. Delayed, High Counselor. Sensor ghosts clutter the approach vector, likely more of the humans' tricks. They're seeding the void with false echoes, pulling our navigators off course and forcing constant recalibrations. Regret coiled tighter in Vexer's gut, a cold knot that he shoved down with practiced discipline, refusing to let it surface fully. The Council had demanded this war, their votes cast in the reassuring glow of victory simulations that painted humans as primitives, scattered across fragile worlds. No match for the unified might of the Kreller Dominion. Purge the threat, secure the frontier, expand the hive's reach, that had been the mantra. Now those words echoed hollow amid the static-laced screams from the front lines, the feed alive with the chaos of unraveling plans. Recall the vanguard if necessary to consolidate strength, he snapped, his voice regaining its edge. But prepare the orbital lance for deployment. If Lyra cannot crack the station from close range, we'll glass it from afar. No mercy for these vermin who dare resist the inevitable. Down on the bridge of the Stingwing, Lyra gripped the command rail with white-knuckled claws as another railgun round from the station shuddered through the hull, the vibration rattling loose panels and sending dust sifting from the overhead vents. Alarms wailed in piercing tones, red lights pulsing like open wounds across the consoles, casting the crew's faces in bloody hues. Her tactical officer, Kren, wiped ichor from a fresh gash on his forelimb, shrapnel from the earlier torpedo graze that had left a scar across the outer hull. Shields are holding, but barely, Admiral, he reported, his voice strained through gritted mandibles. The humans are prioritizing our flanks with coordinated fire. That freighter isn't just launching decoys. It's deploying boarding pods directly into our formation. Lyra's mind raced, her eyes scanning the tactical overlay projected in the air before her, a web of glowing lines and icons that showed the battle's shifting tides. The humans fought like cornered insects, not the disorganized rabble that intelligence had painted in their briefings. Their station's defenses wove a net of interlocking fire arcs, drawing the Kreller fleet into carefully prepared kill zones, where escape was narrow and costly. She'd led purges before, swift, clinical strikes against lesser threats on the fringes, where enemies broke under the weight of the swarm. This was different, more visceral, gnawing at her with a personal edge she hadn't anticipated. Divert all available power to the forward arrays, she ordered, her tone brooking no delay. Target that freighter's engine specifically. If we cripple their screen, we can push through to the station's core. Kren nodded sharply, his claws flying over the controls in a blur, rerouting energy flows with practiced efficiency. Aye, Admiral, but our drones are thinning out rapidly. Their point defense turrets are shredding them mid-swarm, turning our numbers against us. The viewport flared brightly as plasma bolts lanced out from the Stingwing's batteries, scoring the freighter's flank with molten gashes. It listed to one side, venting atmosphere in a silvery plume that twisted in the void, but it didn't falter or retreat. Instead, a fresh volley of boarding pods streaked toward the Kreller line, burrowing into the vulnerable undersides of escort vessels like parasites seeking flesh. Boarders confirmed on the Kreshik and 2 others, a sensor tech yelped, her voice steady but laced with the sharp edge of rising panic as the alerts multiplied. Lyra's blood chilled in her veins, a rare shiver running through her exoskeleton. Humans in close quarters. Clumsy and oxygen-dependent, yes, but relentless in their ferocity. Frontier raid stories whispered through the ranks spoke of their savagery. Hands gripping tools turned into improvised weapons, ship corridors transformed into slaughterhouses slick with ichor and blood. No quarter asked, none given. Eject the affected sections immediately, she barked, her command echoing across the bridge. Seal all bulkheads and vent the intruders to space. No time for captures or interrogations. Purge them utterly. Explosions dotted the tactical feed as the orders were executed with ruthless speed, debris blooming like fractured jewels in the void, carrying the frozen forms of boarders and crew alike into the endless black. But the cost mounted inexorably. 2 escorts went silent on the displays, their crews lost in the purge, icons winking out like dying stars. Lyra's resolve hardened further, masking the flicker of doubt that threatened to surface amid the chaos. The Council watched from afar. Failure here meant not just tactical disgrace but personal ruin, or worse, the sting of the executioner's lance for perceived weakness. Back in the chamber on the homeworld, Vexer halted his pacing abruptly as a priority transmission pierced the din of ongoing reports. The hologram shimmering to reveal Lyra's face etched with visible strain. Her crest spines flared in defiant posture. Counselor, the assault is bogging down in the outer perimeter, she reported, her voice tight over the link. Human ingenuity is outpacing our simulations at every turn. We need the orbital lance authorized now, or this becomes a full rout. Vexer's mandibles parted in a low hiss of frustration, his eyes locking onto hers through the projection. Authorized without question. But mark it well, Admiral. The Council's eyes are upon you, and our patience is not infinite. Bring me their station intact for study, or do not return at all. The link severed with a sharp click, leaving only the hum of cooling servers and the weight of unspoken fears hanging in the air. Outside the viewport, the homeworld's twin moons cast their pale, indifferent light across the chamber, oblivious to the war's unraveling threads far beyond. Vexer turned back to the display, willing the tide to shift in their favor. Even as the whisper of regret gnawed deeper into his core, a persistent ache that no amount of strategic denial could fully silence. Admiral Lyra's claws tightened around the command console as the orbital lance fired, a searing beam of coalesced energy lancing through the void toward the human station, the discharge's hum vibrating through the Stingwing's hull like a predator's deep growl. The bridge crew held their collective breath, mandibles clenched as the weapon's path traced a glowing scar across the tactical overlay. But the beam veered at the last moment. Deflected by an improvised energy field the humans had jury-rigged from salvaged debris and station components, turning what should have been total annihilation into a mere glancing scar across the station's outer ring, blackening armor but failing to penetrate. "Status report now," Lyra barked, her spines flattening against her scalp in a rare display of frustration, her voice echoing sharply off the bulkheads. The tactical display flickered erratically, red icons swarming as human fighters peeled away from the station's bays, their engines flaring with erratic bursts of thrust that defied the predictive algorithms of the Kreller targeting systems. Engineer Kale, her second-in-command, leaned forward intently, his multifaceted eyes scanning the cascading readouts with clinical focus. "The deflection matrix held firm, Admiral," he confirmed grimly. "Their engineers adapted our own shield harmonics, reversed the frequencies against us in a feedback loop. Casualties on their side are minimal, but we've lost 3 lances to overload from the rebound energy. Lyra's mandibles clicked sharply in irritation. Vexor's authorization had come too late. The humans had used the delay to buy themselves precious time, and now their response was unfolding with alarming speed. Drones launched from the station's bays not in rigid formation, but in a chaotic swarm, weaving through the Kreller fleet's defensive grid like insects evading a swatter, their paths unpredictable and maddening. One of her corvettes buckled under the onslaught, its hull blooming with secondary explosions as human boarders, actual boarding parties in sealed suits, latched onto the breaches with magnetic grapples, cutting their way inside with plasma torches. Boarders confirmed on the Krishik, a sensor tech reported, her voice steady but laced with the edge of mounting panic as the alerts piled up. They're cutting through the inner bulkheads already. Small arms fire only so far. No heavy weapons detected yet, but it's only a matter of time. Lyra slammed a fist against the armrest of her chair, the impact echoing in the tense silence that gripped the bridge. These humans fought dirty, turning the Kreller technological superiority into a liability through sheer unyielding improvisation. Her pre-battle simulations had predicted swift surrender after the first lance strike. The station's crew cowering under the hive's might. Not this relentless, adaptive resistance that seemed to evolve with every exchange. Deploy containment teams to all affected vessels, she ordered, her tone cold and unyielding. Seal those sections and vent them to space without hesitation. No mercy. End this incursion before it spreads like a virus through the fleet. Kyle hesitated briefly, his claws twitching on the console as he processed the implications. Admiral, the Kreshik's carrying our reserve power cells for the next barrage. If the boarders reach the engineering bay, they won't. Lyra cut him off sharply. Her gaze locked on the viewport where the human station loomed like a battered fortress, its lights pulsing with defiant energy amid the swirling debris. She keyed the fleet-wide channel, her voice broadcasting to every ship in the formation. All vessels, tighten your formation immediately. Focus fire on their drone clusters, prioritize elimination. We're not losing ground to these pests no matter how they squirm. The battle intensified in response, her cruisers unleashing coordinated volleys that shredded dozens of incoming drones, debris fields blooming like metallic flowers in the void, scattering fragments that pinged harmlessly off Allied shields. Yet for every drone destroyed, 2 more seemed to emerge from the station's bays, guided by some uncanny human intuition that bypassed the Kreller jammers and predictive locks with frustrating ease. On the Kreshik, frantic reports flooded the comms. Containment teams pinned down in narrow corridors, the air thick with smoke and the sharp cracks of human firearms echoing through breached hulls. Then a human voice crackled over a hijacked comm channel, distorted by interference but clear enough, taunting, almost amused in its insolence. Hey bugfolk, you forgot to lock your back door. Lyra's blood heated with rage at the mockery, her spines bristling fully. Insolence from prey. She ordered a precision strike on the corvette's position, lances charging for a surgical hit, but the humans had already anticipated the response. They severed the docking clamps with explosive charges, sending the Kreshik tumbling away from the fleet like a discarded shield, its mass absorbing the incoming fire. Explosions rippled across its side in a chain reaction, the reserve power cells igniting in a cataclysmic bloom that lit the void like a dying star, the shockwave buffeting nearby vessels. Damage report, Lyra demanded, forcing a veneer of calm into her voice as the bridge lights dimmed slightly from the strain on the ship's reserves. Emergency protocols kicking in. Kale's reply was grim, his eyes not leaving the readouts. Kreshik is gone, total loss. That's 20% of our forward firepower erased in one stroke. And the humans? They're regrouping around the station core. Whatever they did with our power cells, it bought them a surge. Their defensive fields are strengthening, modulating to counter our next wave. Lyra stared at the display, the human icons holding firm and unyielding, a wall of resilience that mocked the hive's advance. Vexor's words echoed in her mind like a judgment. Bring me their station or don't return. The war's weight settled heavier on her shoulders, the first real fracture appearing in their grand strategy. A crack that threatened to widen with every passing moment. She straightened in her harness, spines rigid with determination. Prepare the secondary lances for firing sequence. We adapt to their tricks or we break against them here and now. But as the fleet began to maneuver into position, a new alert blared across the bridge. Human reinforcements slipping in from the asteroid belt's shadows. their signatures masked until the last possible instant, blooming like venom sacs ready to burst. Lyra's claws tightened on the command rail as the alert's chime drilled into the bridge like a persistent stinger, overriding the ambient hum of straining systems. Reinforcements, human signatures blooming unexpectedly like venom sacs in the void, slipping from the asteroid belt's dense shadows where sensors struggled to penetrate. She snapped her spines forward aggressively, her compound eyes locked on the tactical hollows that updated in real time, painting a grim picture. "Status on those ghost signatures, give me details, not guesses," she barked at Kale, her voice a low rasp that cut through the rising tension like a vibroblade. Kale's tendrils flickered rapidly over his panel, pulling in data streams from the overburdened sensors, his face a mask of focused calculation. 10 signatures confirmed now, Admiral, fighters and light corvettes. Nothing in the heavy cruiser class, but they're vectoring straight for the station's unprotected flank. Masks dropped. They were riding the debris wakes to hide their thermal blooms, making them invisible until this close. The bridge crew stirred uneasily, murmurs rippling through them like disturbed water on a still pond, the air thick with the scent of overheating circuits and anxious pheromones. Lyra felt the fracture in their formation widen imperceptibly. The vaunted fleet, pride of the Council and symbol of hive supremacy, now dancing on a knife's edge between victory and catastrophe. Vexer's demand burned in her thoughts like acid. Secure the station or face disgrace with no room for retreat or excuse. "Divert Gamma Lance to intercept those reinforcements immediately," she ordered, her tone brooking no delay. "Full burn on approach, keep plasma lances hot and ready. Do not let them link up with the station's defenders. We break them in the open void." Kale nodded, his face a mask of calculated calm, but Lyra caught the subtle twitch in his secondary eyes. A telltale sign of doubt, or perhaps just the cumulative strain of the prolonged engagement. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Launching intercept now, but our reserves are threadbare after the Krishik's loss. If this drags into a prolonged skirmish, it won't." She cut him off firmly, turning to the comms officer, a wiry subaltern named Thorn with quills perpetually half-raised in perpetual alert, his scarred mandible a badge from a prior frontier skirmish. "Signal the Council reserves for an immediate surge. We need that backup power and additional swarms, or we're fighting shadows in the dark." Thorn's response was a hesitant click of his mandibles, his claws hovering over the transmission array. "Channels are jammed solid, ma'am. Human ECM. It's like they're weaving the interference directly into the asteroid belt's natural noise, turning the entire field into a blackout zone." Lyra's mandibles ground together audibly, frustration boiling beneath her composed exterior. Improvise. Adapt. That's what separated the predators of the hive from the prey they hunted. Then punch through the interference with a priority override on all frequencies. Blast it if you have to. And prepare the boarding pods for launch from the flanks. If the lances fail to break them, we'll crack that station the old way, with claws and unbridled fury. The hollows shifted dynamically as Gamma Lance streaked out from the main formation, their ion trails carving blue scars across the display like wounds in the black. Lyra watched the intercept play out in accelerated simulations overlaid on the feed. Human ships darting like minnows through the debris, evading the first plasma volleys with impossible agility that seemed almost precognitive. One corvette took a glancing hit to its flank, venting atmosphere in a silent plume that twisted away, but the rest wove even tighter, closing the gap to the station with relentless precision. "They're adapting faster than we are," Cal muttered under his breath, leaning in closer to the hollow, his voice barely audible over the hum. "Look at the patterns, coordinated feints. That lead fighter is drawing our fire deliberately while the heavier corvettes slip behind the cover of the larger rocks." Lyra's spines flattened against her neck, a rare physiological sign of unease rippling through her frame. The humans shouldn't have this level of coordination. Their technology was brute force incarnate, relays of raw power and mechanical simplicity, not the elegant interwoven weaves of council engineering that allowed for seamless adaptation. Yet here they were, turning the belt's inherent chaos into an impenetrable shield, every asteroid a potential ambush point. An explosion lit the hollow suddenly. Gamma's lead ship gutted by a human missile swarm that erupted from concealed launchers, debris scattering in a wide arc and pinging off allied shields like erratic rain. Casualty scrolls updated in real time. 12 dead already, hull breaches on 2 more vessels threatening to cascade. Pull them back. Regroup on the main line. Lyra snarled, her command slicing through the rising alarms. The plan had backfired spectacularly. Gamma scattering in disarray instead of crushing the reinforcements outright. Now the human ships were merging seamlessly with the station's defenders, their combined fields pulsing stronger in unity, forming a mocking front that highlighted the Kreller fleet's growing disarray. Thorn's console beeped with a clear tone amid the chaos. Council response incoming. Negative on the surge request. They're holding back the reserves. Orders to conserve forces for the anticipated core world assault phase. Rage coiled hot and unyielding in Lyra's gut. A seething fury at the politics playing out while her lances bled in the void. Vexer. That scheming elder with his eyes on personal glory, hoarding fleets for high-profile strikes while leaving her vanguard to scrape by on dwindling fumes. The war they had all craved now choked them from within, reserves dry and morale cracking like old weathered chitin under strain. Regroup the fleet into a wedge formation, she said, her voice steel-hard over the rising cacophony of alarms and reports. Direct assault on the station. We'll end this ourselves, without waiting for the cowards in the rear to deign to help. As the ships realigned sluggishly, their movements hampered by accumulating damage and faltering engines, Lyra glimpsed a new signature on the edge of the scans. Something larger, unmistakably human, lurking deeper in the asteroid belt's tangled mass. Not more reinforcements, a trap perhaps, or something worse waiting to spring. The cost of this engagement mounted with every heartbeat, and the void offered no mercy, only the cold indifference of space. Lyra's fingers tightened on the armrest as the sensor ping sharpened, cutting through the bridge's persistent hum like a blade through silk, demanding attention. The human signature bloomed fully on the main display now, a hulking silhouette weaving through the asteroid field's jagged teeth. Not charging aggressively, not fleeing in panic, just waiting, patient as a predator in ambush. Captain? Ensign Kale's voice cracked slightly from the navigation station, his tendrils twitching with urgency as he cross-referenced the data. It's a cruiser, class unknown to our databases, human design at its core, but heavily modified with belt-scavenged armor. Shields are up and modulating, weapons arrays hot and charging. They're masking something substantial behind those rocks. Could be a launcher array or additional support. Thorn spun in his chair, his scarred mandible clicking in alarm, eyes widening at the implications. Ambush vector confirmed, Admiral. If we commit the wedge formation now, blind to that flank, they'll hit us from the side. Projected losses could hit 60% or higher. Our current configuration can't withstand a crossfire. Lyra's mind raced through contingencies, the earlier denial from the Council burning like acid in her veins, fueling a bitter resolve. Vexer and his ilk back home hoarded their precious fleets for glory strikes on the core worlds, leaving her vanguard to fight on fumes and dwindling hope. No surge of reinforcements, no tactical lifeline, just this ghost in the belt, where human grit and spite turned every shadow into a weapon, every scrap of debris into a tool of defiance. She could almost hear their laughter echoing through the comms, those adaptable apes who had built sprawling empires from nothing but scrap and unyielding will. Hold the formation steady, she ordered, her voice a whip crack that snapped the crew to attention. Divert the flankers to probe that signature. Light taps only, no full commitment. Draw them out into the open where we can engage on our terms. The bridge crew moved like a well-oiled machine despite the fatigue etching lines into their faces, the weight of prolonged combat showing in slumped postures and flickering antennae. Probes launched in silent arcs from the escort vessels, their faint drives pulsing against the void. Sensors reaching out like tendrils into the unknown. Minutes stretched taut as the fleet's engines thrummed low, inching forward toward the station's battered hull, the tension building like pressure in a sealed chamber. Then a sudden flare erupted on the hollows, human countermeasures blooming like false stars in the darkness, scattering the probes in a web of exploding debris and sensor ghosts. They're jamming us hard, Kale reported, slamming a fist on his console in frustration, the impact jarring the nearby panels. Full-spectrum interference. We can't get a clean lock on their position anymore, it's all noise. Thorn's eyes narrowed to slits, his quills fully erect now. Clever bastards. They're using the belt's natural interference to their full advantage, amplifying it with their own emitters. If we commit the wedge blind into that mess, it'll be a slaughter. Our ships picked off one by one. Lyra stood from her chair, pacing the deck with deliberate steps, her boots echoing softly against the metal grating. each footfall a punctuation to her racing thoughts. The war the Council had ignited with such fanfare now devoured its own children. Her ships limped from the last skirmish, crews whispering of retreat in the lower decks, morale fraying at the edges. But yielding here meant the station remained in human hands, a fortified foothold that could unravel the entire frontier campaign, inviting more incursions into hive space. No, they would press on, adapt or perish, mirroring the very tenacity the humans wielded so effectively. Adapt then, she said aloud, halting before the tactical hollow, the display flickering with simulated asteroid tumbles in chaotic patterns. Route auxiliary power from secondary shields to our sensor arrays. We'll burn through their jam with a focused burst, overwhelm it.
Kale, plot a micro-jump for the flankers. Skip the probes entirely.
Go straight for a feint insertion at the belt's edge. Kale hesitated, his cautious nature surfacing in the furrow of his brow and the slight droop of his antennae, weighing the risks. That's risky, ma'am. The belt's density is extreme. Re-entry shear could tear the frigates apart if the jump calculus is off by even a fraction. Do it. Thorne backed her immediately, his brave edge cutting through the doubt like a lance, his voice firm. Better a graze from the rocks than a gutting from their guns. Engines whined in protest as power shifted through the fleet, the stingwing groaning under the strain, bulkheads creaking faintly. Lyra watched the hollow intently, the human cruiser shifting subtly in response, its outline sharpening like a predator scenting blood on the wind. The feint jump initiated with a series of warp flickers. 3 frigates vanishing from formation and reappearing perilously close to the belt's edge. Alarms wailing across the bridge as proximity warnings triggered. Contact, immediate engagement! A tech shouted, the feed alive with fire. Human lances lanced out in precise, unrelenting bursts, carving deep into one frigate's flank, sending it spinning with venting plasma, but the others returned fire swiftly, their lances grazing the cruiser's reinforced armor, scoring hits that forced it to twist away. The jam cracked under the sensor burst, data rushing in like a flood, revealing the humans' clever play, a hidden pod launcher embedded in the rocks, seeding the field with automated drones that swarmed like angry hornets. Target those launchers immediately, Lyra commanded, adrenaline surging through her veins like liquid fire. Full barrage. Clear the path for the wedge. The fleet unleashed in unison, energy beams stitching the void with lethal precision. Drones popped like brittle eggs under the onslaught, the human cruiser twisting desperately to evade but too slow in its bulk. A direct hit buckled its hull plating, forcing it to pull back into deeper cover, trailing sparks and debris into the dark. Cheers rippled across the bridge, short-lived and ragged, as the station loomed ever closer in the viewport, its point defenses flickering back to life with renewed vigor. The cost of the probe was tallied quickly. 1 frigate left adrift, its crews fighting raging fires in the black vacuum, escape pods launching in futile hope. Lyra sank back into her seat, the victory feeling hollow and pyrrhic in her grasp. The humans wouldn't break easily. They'd adapt just as she had, turning every setback into fuel for their resistance. But for now, the wedge formation held, pressing forward into the fray. Lyra's claws tightened on the armrest as the viewscreen flickered with static. The human cruiser's retreat leaving a smeared trail of debris in its wake, glinting faintly against the stars. Alarms blared from the auxiliary stations, secondary explosions rippling through the drifting frigate's husk, its silhouette fracturing into jagged pieces that tumbled slowly away. Status on the wedge formation, she snapped, her voice cutting through the bridge's hum like a vibroblade through armor, demanding clarity amid the chaos. Engineer Kale pivoted from his console, his fur matted with sweat from the relentless strain, holographic readouts dancing between his extended tendrils. Holding steady for now, Captain. But the station's point defenses are recalibrating in real time. Those human drones we just cleared bought them crucial time to reinforce. He tapped furiously at his panel, pulling up overlays that showed energy spikes building in the station's orbital ring, a telltale sign of impending counterfire. Doubt gnawed at Lyra's resolve like an unseen burrowing parasite. 1 frigate already lost to the void, and how many more before the entire wedge splintered under the pressure? The Council's assault fleet pressed forward regardless, a spearhead of sleek destroyers carving toward the human stronghold, their lances glowing with charged fury. But the accumulating toll weighed heavy. Launch counter-drones from the flanks to screen our advance, Lyra ordered, rising to pace the deck once more, her steps measured to project unyielding command. Her second Vor nodded from the tactics board, his scarred muzzle twisting in grim approval, the old wound from a prior purge pulling tight. Aye, seeding the approach vector with our own swarms, Vor confirmed, his claws initiating the deployment. But Captain, the humans are venting plasma from their freighter in controlled bursts. It's a feint. They're masking something bigger behind the exhaust plume. The bridge crew leaned in collectively, breaths held as sensor pings multiplied across the displays, faint signatures blooming like hidden thorns amid the wreckage. There, concealed in the drifting clouds, the human cruiser, that battered beast of improvised might, wasn't truly fleeing. It was repositioning with calculated precision, its underbelly ports glowing with the telltale blue of magnetic accelerators priming for launch. Lyra's hearts pounded in dual rhythm, a surge of adrenaline sharpening her senses. Evasive maneuvers. All ships break pattern immediately, scatter the formation. Too late. Pods ejected from the cruiser in a silent swarm. Not crude drones this time, but something sleeker and more insidious. Micro-torpedoes, guided by that infernal human adaptability, their warheads adaptive and homing on the weakest links in the Kreller line. One destroyer shuddered violently as multiple impacts bloomed across its shields, hull plates shearing away in fiery petals that spiraled into the void. Vor cursed sharply, slamming a fist on his panel, the console sparking under the force, shields down to 40% across the board. We're exposed, fatally if they press the attack. Lyra grabbed the comms rail for support, her mind racing through a whirlwind of contingencies, the deck tilting as the Stingwing evaded a near miss. The council back on the homeworld had crowed about swift victory over these primitive upstarts, their briefings filled with disdain for human tech. But here, in the cold grip of space, those primitives had built weapons that turned the tide with ruthless efficiency, every improvisation a dagger to the hive's pride. Redirect all available fire to those torpedoes. Prioritize the cruiser as the source, she commanded, her voice steady despite the turmoil. Kale, can we jam their guidance systems? Disrupt the homing locks before they close. The engineer shook his head grimly, his eyes wide with the weight of impossibility. Their signals are quantum encrypted, Admiral. Layers upon layers. We'd need to get much closer to overload them. But that station's guns would shred us before we could align. A direct hit rocked the bridge then, sparks erupting from an overhead conduit in a shower of molten droplets, forcing the crew to scatter and patch the breach with hasty seals as Lyra steadied herself against the rail. The wedge was fraying at the edges. 2 destroyers peeled off course, trailing wisps of atmosphere from breached compartments, their captains' frantic hails filling the comms channels with pleas for support. In the midst of the chaos, a new alert pierced the din, more human reinforcements slipping in from the asteroid belt like ghosts materializing from the shadows, their corvettes laced with those same improvised launchers, turning the debris field into a labyrinth of programmed death. Lyra's resolve hardened into something unbreakable, a bulwark against the encroaching despair. They wouldn't yield the station, not with the Council's pride and her own honor hanging in the balance. Form up on me, all remnants, she broadcast to the battered fleet, her words a rallying cry. Tight diamond configuration, flank the asteroids and use their mass for cover. We adapt to their chaos, or we burn in it. Vor met her gaze across the bridge, his voice low and edged with the gravity of the moment. Captain, the Council's orders were explicit. No retreat under any circumstances. But this engagement, it's eroding us faster than projected. This is war, Lyra finished for him, her claws retracting slightly as she settled back into full command mode, the weight of leadership a familiar burden. The fleet reformed around her flagship, engines flaring against the black canvas of space, dodging torpedo wakes that lit the void in staccato bursts of destruction. One corvette exploded in a brilliant nova of released energy, its sacrifice buying the formation precious seconds to realign. Kale whooped suddenly from his station, a rare outburst cutting through the tension. Jamming fields up, partial effect holding. Their torpedoes are veering off course, scattering into the debris. But the cost mounted relentlessly, a ledger of losses that scarred the tactical display. Another frigate listed badly, its crew evacuating into escape pods that the humans picked off with cold precision, like target practice in a simulation. Lyra watched one such pod streak past the viewport, its occupant visible for a heartbeat through the transparent hull, a human face, defiant and unbowed even in the face of certain death. No, not defeat for them. They were the ones innovating ceaselessly, turning every scrap of wreckage into a weapon, every moment of hesitation into an opportunity. The station loomed larger now in the viewport, its docking arms bristling with repair drones swarming like industrious insects. But the path to it was a gauntlet of fire and stone. As the diamond formation punched through the outer defenses, a massive energy lance from the station grazed their lead destroyer, carving a deep gash along its spine that vented crew and systems alike into the void. Alarms wailed anew, red lights bathing the bridge in urgency. Hull breach on Deck 3. Containment failing. Vor reported, his calm facade cracking for the first time, voice rising in pitch. Lyra nodded, forcing steel into her tone to steady the crew. Seal it off and reroute life support. Push forward. We take the core of that station, or the Council takes our heads in disgrace. The battle surged deeper into the asteroid shadows, humans countering with boarding shuttles that latched onto Kreller hulls like parasitic organisms. Grapples firing and breaching charges booming silently in the vacuum. Lyra's own ship shuddered under the assault. Marines rushing through corridors to repel the intruders, the comms alive with the chatter of small arms fire. She drew her sidearm from its holster, the weight familiar and reassuring in her grip. To arms, all hands. We hold the line here. No further. In the frenzy of close-quarters defense, human ingenuity struck again like lightning. Their boarders weren't mere soldiers charging with brute force. They carried viral code injectors, hacking into Kreller systems mid-fight, injecting malware that spread like a digital plague. Lights flickered erratically on the bridge, consoles glitching with corrupted data streams. Kale fought the intrusion at his station, sweat beading on his exoskeleton as he isolated segments. They're in the nav core, rerouting our power distribution, trying to cripple the engines. Lyra fired a shot down the corridor as a nearby breach alarm sounded, the report echoing sharply. The war they had craved so eagerly was here in its rawest form, unyielding and brutal, and regret whispered at the edges of her mind like a traitor's voice. But adaptation was the essence of survival in the hive. Switch to manual overrides, plot a collision course on their lead corvette if we must to break free. The crew rallied around her, a desperate grit mirroring the human's own unbreaking spirit. They clawed their way through the melee, the station's enveloping shadow drawing closer, victory hanging by a frayed tether that threatened to snap at any moment. Kale's fingers flew across the auxiliary console, rerouting auxiliary power through the emergency conduits with frantic precision, sparks dancing like fireflies in the dim, flickering light of the bridge. The vents finally quieted with a reluctant hiss, leaving only the deep groan of stressed metal echoing through the hull, a testament to the ship's endurance. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his claw, glancing up at Lyra, who stood rigid by the tactical display, her eyes scanning the incoming sensor pings with unblinking intensity. They're flanking us hard now, she said, her voice steady but edged with the gravel of exhaustion. 2 frigates closing from the asteroid belt. Council signatures, but they're probing aggressively, testing for weaknesses. Irm, the grizzled engineer, grunted from his perch under a nearby panel, tools clanging as he jury-rigged a bypass to stabilize the flickering power grid. Probing? That's a full assault vector if I've ever seen one. Our shields are down to 30%. If they hit us broadside with those lances, we're vapor, no question. Kyle nodded grimly, his mind racing through the debris cloud visible on the external feeds. A swirling graveyard of shattered hulls and expended munitions. The station's remnants offered scant cover now, jagged edges that could shield as easily as impale. But the Council's ships were sleek predators built for precision strikes in open space. The corvette they defended had been built for endurance, not elegance, and that raw human grit was their edge in this desperate hour. We can't outrun them in this state, Kyle said, his tone measured. Draw them in closer. Use the rocks to our advantage. Turn the field into our ally. Lyra's lips quirked in a half-smile, the first crack in her cautious demeanor since the near scrape with the torpedoes, a spark of her innate wit surfacing amid the grit. Bait and bleed them? Risky as hell, but they've never tangled with our kind up close like this. Let's make them regret it. She keyed the comms array, broadcasting a feigned distress signal laced with garbled static to mimic a dying ship's final plea. This is Outpost Remnant Vessel. Engines failing critical. Requesting immediate aid. Coordinates attached. The response came swift and cold over open channels, the Council's transmission crisp and devoid of empathy. Surrender your coordinates without delay. Resistance is futile against the Accord's might. Irm snorted derisively from his position, emerging with a triumphant wave of his wrench, grease smeared across his scales. Futile? Tell that to the junkyard we just turned their last probe into. He slapped the console with satisfaction, and the engines hummed back to life, uneven but fierce, propelling them forward with renewed vigor. As the frigates accelerated in pursuit, weaving through the asteroids like arrows loosed from a bow, Kale plotted the trap with careful precision. One particularly large rock, honeycombed with old mining tunnels from forgotten operations, perfect for an ambush, its unstable structure a weapon in waiting. He fired auxiliary thruster bursts to sell the illusion of weakness, limping the corvette toward it with deliberate sluggishness. Lyra manned the turrets manually, her shots precise warning nicks that scored the lead frigate's armor without committing to a full duel, drawing them inexorably closer. The lead ship lunged forward, its energy lances charging with a telltale glow, grazing an asteroid and shedding fragments in its haste, but pressing on undeterred. Kale waited, heart pounding in his chest until the gap narrowed to suicide range, the scopes showing the enemy's overconfidence in stark detail. Now, Irm triggered the improvised minefield without hesitation. Salvaged station charges daisy-chained through the debris field, detonating in a silent bloom that engulfed the frigate's nose, crumpling its forward section like flimsy foil under pressure. Shrapnel peppered the second ship in a deadly hail, forcing it to veer wildly into a cluster of tumbling rocks. Collision alarms blared across open channels, the Council's formation shattering in an instant, panic rippling through their comms. But victory always bit back in war's cruel embrace. The corvette shuddered as return fire from the second frigate clipped their flank, shearing off a sensor array in a shower of sparks. Alarms wailed anew. Life support flickered in the aft section. Air recyclers straining. Lyra cursed under her breath, sealing bulkheads manually from the bridge controls, her suit's seals hissing tight as atmosphere stabilized. We've got hull integrity holding, but we're blind on that side now. And they're calling in reinforcements. Expect more soon. Kale steered through the expanding debris cloud, the console hot under his palms from overloaded circuits. The second frigate limped after them, trailing plasma from its wounds, but its guns still spat defiance, lances probing the darkness. Irm patched what he could from engineering, sweat beading on his face and dripping onto the wiring. One more hit like that and we're done for. What's the play here, Captain? Lyra met Kale's eyes across the bridge, her wit surfacing through the grit like a blade from a sheath. We don't run from this. We turn their mistake into our victory. She pointed to the nav chart, highlighting a narrow chute through the field where the rocks pinched tight in a natural bottleneck. Force them to follow us in there. Our hull's tougher, built to take the scraping. Theirs will crack first against the walls. Kale punched in the coordinates without hesitation, the corvette surging forward with a roar of engines. The frigate pursued, scanners locked on their trail, overconfident in its pursuit. As they entered the chute, Kyle jinked hard, the hull scraping against unyielding stone with a screech that vibrated through the deck, but they emerged whole on the other side. Behind them, the frigate wedged immovably, metal screeching in protest as it ground to a halt, engines flaring uselessly against the unyielding rock. Silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the steady hum of stabilizing systems and the crew's ragged breaths. Irm leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. That was too damn close. The Council's learning our tricks fast, won't fall for the same bait twice. Lyra holstered her sidearm with a click, the weight of the narrow wind settling like dust after a storm. Let them learn. We've got more where that came from. Adaptability is our birthright. Kale watched the scopes intently, the frigate's distress beacon pulsing weakly in the distance. Reinforcements would come soon, drawn by the echo, but for now they could breathe, regroup, and press on. The war's cost etched deeper into their ship and souls, another scar, another tally in the ledger of survival. They accelerated away, unbowed but wary, the stars stretching ahead. Kyle's fingers danced over the controls with renewed focus, the corvette's engines whining in protest as they pushed through the asteroid field's outer fringe, emerging into clearer space. Debris pinged off the hull like scattered hail from a passing storm, each impact a stark reminder of their narrow escape, the vibrations traveling through the deck like echoes of near death. The scopes showed no immediate pursuit, The immediate threat silenced for the moment, but Lyra paced the bridge relentlessly, her boots thudding softly against the deck plates, a rhythm of unresolved tension. "We can't keep running blind like this," she said, her eyes flicking to the nav display where vectors plotted potential escapes. "That frigate's beacon will draw every Council patrol in the sector within hours. We need a clean vector out, something that doesn't lead straight back to the main fleet's position." Irm nodded from his station in the cramped engineering bay, his face gaunt under the flickering console lights, shadows deepening the lines of fatigue. He'd patched the latest hull breach with emergency foam sealant, but the ship's overall integrity was fraying like old rope pushed beyond its limits, seams straining under the cumulative abuse. "Scans are picking up a relay station 2 micro-jumps out," he reported, his voice rough from shouting over engine noise earlier. "It's in what's left of neutral territory. Abandoned or contested, hard to say. We could dock there, siphon some fresh intel from the databanks, maybe even reroute our transponder signature to throw off trackers." Cale glanced back over his shoulder, his jaw set in determination, the cautious strategist in him weighing the risks. Neutral territory's a joke these days with the war heating up. The Council's bought off half the independents along the rim with promises of salvage rights, but it's still better than drifting aimlessly into their patrol net. He punched in the coordinates with finality, the ship lurching as it aligned for the micro-jump, warp fields building with a familiar hum. The transition was rough, stars stretching into elongated lines before snapping back into focus with a jolt that rattled loose tools in their holders. They emerged into a dimmer stretch of void, the relay station looming ahead like a skeletal hand outstretched against the swirling glow of a distant nebula, its skeletal framework a relic of pre-war commerce. Antennas bristled from its superstructure, silent but watchful, scanning the emptiness. Lyra strapped herself into the TAC console, her fingers hovering over targeting protocols ready for any sign of threat. "Docking bay looks clear on initial scans. No heat signatures on approach, but I'm reading encrypted bursts filtering through the relays. Council chatter, piggybacking on the old trade frequencies. Jam it if things turn sour," Irm muttered from his position, rerouting power to the shields as a precaution, his cautious nature having saved them more than once by spotting overconfidence in enemies before it was too late. Now he monitored life support closely, the air recyclers humming louder to compensate for the strain on the systems. They eased the Corvette into the bay with careful thrusts, magnetic clamps engaging with a dull, reassuring thunk that echoed through the hull. Silence gripped the bridge as the ramp lowered with a hydraulic whine, exposing them to the station's cavernous interior. Dim emergency lights casting long, wavering shadows over rusted gantries and scattered crates of forgotten cargo. The air stale with disuse. Cale led the way out, sidearm drawn and held low, his steps measured and silent on the grated flooring. Lyra flanked him closely, her witty edge dulled by the sharp focus of survival, rifle at the ready. "Feels like walking into a trap," she whispered. Or maybe just a tomb. Either way, eyes open. Irm trailed behind scanner and claw, its soft whir the only sound breaking the quiet. Power levels are minimal across the board. Last log entry indicates evacuation 3 cycles ago. Pirates hit it hard, not the Council directly. But those encrypted bursts, they're fresh looping patterns that scream surveillance. A faint clank echoed from the upper levels then, freezing the trio in place, weapons snapping up instinctively. Cale signaled a halt with a raised claw, crouching behind a bulkhead for cover, the metal cold against his exoskeleton. The scanner beeped softly in response. 2 life signs moving slow and deliberate. Not mechanical drones, organic, cautious. Lyra whispered urgently. "Ambush setup?" Before Irm could run a deeper diagnostic, a voice crackled over the station's ancient intercom. Distorted by age and interference, but unmistakably human. Perhaps another rogue element, survivor or scavenger. "Docking party, state your affiliation right now. We're not looking for trouble here, but we've got your ship pinned in the bay. Don't make us prove it." Cale's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds. Pinned? He checked the external feed on his wrist unit quickly. 2 battered shuttles had slipped in behind them undetected, blocking the bay exits with armed prows. No Council markings visible, but they bristled with weapons arrays salvaged and mismatched. Resource shortages hit hard out on the rim these days. Independents like these scavenged whatever they could, and a Corvette in their condition was prime salvage. Worth a fortune in parts or ransom. We're independents, same as you, Kyle called back, keeping his voice steady and non-threatening, projecting calm authority. Just passing through for a quick data pull from the relays. No fight unless you start one. We've got no quarrel with rim rats. Laughter echoed back, tinny and mocking through the speakers, laced with suspicion. Everyone's independent until the Council's bounty hits the boards. Drop your weapons down here, and maybe we talk shares on whatever you've got aboard. Otherwise we vent the bay and take the ship cold. Lyra's grip tightened on her rifle, her spines bristling subtly. Shares? They'll strip us bare and leave us drifting if we give an inch. She edged toward a side access panel, scouting for maintenance vents or weak points in the structure, her movements fluid and predatory. Irm's scanner whirred faster, pulling environmental data. They're low on fuel. Those shuttles are idling hot, burning reserves just to hold position. If we can overload the bay's maglocks from inside. Kyle nodded, the plan forming in the charged tension of the moment, human grit turning potential disaster into opportunity. Lyra, flank left through the maintenance shafts, get above them for a drop. Irm, rig a power surge on their docking clamps from this console. I'll draw them down into the open, keep them talking. She vanished into the shadows without a word, a ghost slipping through the gloom. Irm worked fast, splicing into a nearby access panel with deft claws, sweat beading on his brow as he bypassed security locks. The clanks grew closer, boots on metal stairs, deliberate and armed. Kale stepped into the open gantry, hands raised but eyes sharp, scanning for advantages. Let's negotiate this face-to-face, no games. Where's your leader? We can work something out. Trade info for passage. 3 figures emerged from the gloom of the upper walkway. Ragged jumpsuits patched with hull scraps and salvaged plating. Weapons trained unsteadily. The leader, a wiry woman with a scarred face and eyes hardened by the rim's cruelties, leveled a pulse rifle at his chest. No names, no bullshit. Just hand over your cargo manifest now. We've got claims on this station and your ship's in our bay. Kale kept talking, his words a deliberate diversion, buying precious time as Lyra's silenced shot sparked from above, clipping a nearby power conduit and plunging sections into deeper shadow. Lights flickered erratically and Irm's surge hit the system. The shuttle's clamps groaned under overload, locking them tight but sparking wildly, systems frying. The leader spun toward the noise, firing blindly into the dark. Treachery! You've got intruders, flush 'em out. Energy bolts scorched the air, forcing Kale to dive behind a stack of crates, the acrid smell of ozone filling his nostrils. He returned fire with precise bursts, pinning the group behind cover, shots ricocheting off metal. Lyra dropped from a gantry overhead like a shadow given form, tackling one scavenger with brutal efficiency, her knee driving into his gut and sending his weapon skittering across the deck. He gasped, winded, as she secured him with a zip tie from her belt. Irm shouted from the panel. Bay's sealing itself, get back to the ship now. Alarms wailed as the station's failing systems reacted to the overload, bulkheads grinding shut with protesting screeches. The leader lunged at Kale in the confusion, but he sidestepped her momentum, using it to slam her into a nearby console, the impact stunning her into a slump. They dragged the scavengers into a storage locker hastily, binding them with cables scavenged from the crates. No kills necessary, as war had conjured enough ghosts already. Racing back to the Corvette, Lyra sealed the ramp as the engines fired to life, the bay shuddering around them, maglocks straining but ultimately holding the enemy's ships captive. Kyle punched the emergency release from the controls, the Corvette tearing free with a violent lurch, debris scattering in their wake. The Corvette's engines roared to full power as it punched through the bay doors, debris scattering like shrapnel in the void, the station receding rapidly on the rear sensors. Kale gripped the co-pilot's console, his knuckles white against the padding, watching the relay shrink into a speck against the nebula's glow. Irm, full damage report now, no sugarcoating, he demanded, his voice tight with the adrenaline crash. Irm's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering, steady but edged with the strain of ongoing repairs, tools clanging in the background. Hull integrity at 70% and dropping slowly. That overload we triggered fried the auxiliary shields completely, but the core drive's holding steady for now. We've got pursuit inbound already. 3 bogies lighting up hot on the long-range scans. Closing fast. Lyra, at the helm, banked the ship hard to port, the inertial dampeners whining in protest as they threaded through a field of floating wreckage from the station's neglected orbits. Stars blurred across the viewport in streaks, the maneuver buying them seconds. They're fast, Scavenger mods for sure, probably stolen council tech grafted onto those hulls. We can't outrun them in a straight-line chase. They'll overhaul us before we clear the nebula. Kale's mind pieced together the incoming scans rapidly, the threats resolving into profiles. Light frigates patched together from war salvage, their weapons arrays glowing with charged plasma coils, signatures screaming opportunistic hunters. One wrong move in this weakened state, and they'd be reduced to vapor, another footnote in the rim's endless skirmishes. He tapped the tactical overlay with urgent claws, highlighting a nearby asteroid cluster dense enough to provide cover. Asteroids dead ahead, dense field, perfect for evasion. Lyra, take us in deep. We use the rocks for cover. Draw them close where their size works against them. She nodded, jaw set in determination, fingers dancing over the controls with expert finesse. The ship shuddered as it dove into the gravitational pull of the cluster, massive boulders the size of habitats tumbling lazily in the low-gravity drift, a chaotic ballet of stone and void. A warning klaxon blared suddenly, enemy fire lancing past from the lead pursuer, close enough to score the aft plating with a heat bloom that lit the engineering readouts red. "They're locking missiles already," Irm reported from below, his voice calm but urgent. "I've got countermeasures prepped and spinning up, but it'll burn through our reserves quick. Shields can't take much more." Kyle unstrapped from his seat, moving swiftly to the weapon station, his hands moving with the practiced grit of survival. He rerouted power from life support to the point defense guns without hesitation, the air in the cockpit growing stuffy as recyclers labored harder, but he ignored the discomfort. "Fire the countermeasures when ready, Irm, Lyra." Faint left. "Make 'em think we're panicked and off balance." The corvette jinked sharply, a missile streaking harmlessly into an intervening asteroid that erupted in a silent bloom of pulverized stone, fragments pinging off the hull like erratic drumbeats. Lyra's laugh was sharp and almost relieved, cutting the tension. "Got one hooked good. They're closing fast now, overconfident." The lead frigate barreled in relentlessly, its guns spitting coherent energy beams that lit the field in staccato flashes, probing for a clean shot. Kyle squeezed the trigger on the point defense array, his bursts chewing into the enemy's forward shields with methodical precision, weakening the barrier. Sparks flew from a nearby console as a near miss rocked the ship. But he held steady, aiming for the thruster vents where vulnerability hid. "Hit it there, target the exhaust ports, cripple their mobility." Irm's countermeasures deployed in a glittering cloud of chaff and decoys, confusing the second frigate's targeting systems utterly. It veered wildly in response, slamming into a spinning rock that sheared off its starboard wing in a cascade of debris, the ship spinning out of control with engines flaring erratically before going dark. A drifting hulk. But the third pursuer was smarter, hanging back at a cautious distance, coordinating its fire with the damaged leader through tight beam links. A torpedo launch pinged on the sensors, homing and adaptive, its warhead adjusting mid-flight to track their evasive path. Lyra cursed under her breath, weaving the corvette through a narrow gap where asteroids ground against each other in slow, menacing menace, the hull groaning under the G-forces. "It's tracking our heat signature dead on. If we dump the engines to cool, we're dead in the water. No thrust, no escape." Kyle's eyes narrowed on the scan data, an idea sparking in the heat of desperation. Human stubbornness at its finest, turning limitation into leverage. "Irm, vent the coolant lines into the cargo bay. Flood it with exhaust plasma. It'll mask our signature completely, buy us time to shake the lock." "Risky maneuver," Irm shot back immediately, his voice laced with caution from engineering. "The bay's not armored for that kind of heat. Could melt the inner bulkheads if it backfires." "Do it anyway." Kale's voice brooked no argument, the weight of improvised command settling like old battered armor on his shoulders. Alarms wailed as valves hissed open in response, superheated gas billowing into the hold. The ship's thermal profile blurring into a hazy cloud on sensors. The torpedo veered off course in confusion, detonating against a distant boulder in a harmless flash. Lyra pushed the throttle to maximum, emerging from the plasma cloud on a fresh vector, the nebula's glow welcoming them. "They're blind now, this is our shot to finish it." Kyle targeted the leader once more, pouring sustained fire into its bridge module, the frigate bucking under the assault as shields collapsed in a cascade of failing emitters. It listed heavily, weapons falling silent, drifting inexorably toward inevitable collision with the surrounding rocks. The last pursuer broke off abruptly, engines flaring bright as it retreated into the black, unwilling to press alone. Silence fell over the cockpit, broken only by the groan of settling hull plates and the whir of cooling systems. Lyra eased back on the controls, plotting a course toward the outer rim's faint signals. We shook them off for now, but the Council's patrols will pick up the echo of that fight soon. This war's chasing us every step now. No respite. Kale stared at the fading station on the rear view screen, a scarred silhouette against the stars, the weight of survival pressing down. Irm's voice came through quieter over the intercom. Coolant's stable again, but we've lost the cargo bay entirely. No more scavenging runs from here on out. He nodded to himself, the cost sinking in like a deep wound. Victory, but hollow at its core, another piece of their fragile edge stripped away. The Corvette accelerated onward, leaving the graveyard field behind, the void stretching endless before them. Lyra's fingers danced over the console with urgent precision, rerouting power from the flickering life support systems to the straining engines, the Corvette shuddering as it punched through a dense debris field, chunks of shattered hull glancing off the weakened shields like hail on thin ice. Alarms blared insistently, red lights pulsing across the cockpit in a frantic rhythm, but she ignored them, her eyes locked unerringly on the nav display where escape vectors flickered. The Council's vanguard was closing relentlessly, 3 signatures resolving on the scopes, fast and unforgiving, their profiles blooming like predators scenting blood in the water, lances already charging for the kill. They're gaining on us steady, Kale said from the co-pilot's seat, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow, the strain etching deeper lines into his face. He braced against the bulkhead, patching a jury-rigged feed from engineering to monitor the chase. 2 minutes to intercept range at this rate. Irm, what's the status down there on those scavenged torpedoes? Irm's reply crackled through the intercom, laced with the strain of working under fire, the clang of tools punctuating his words. Torpedoes are armed and hot, ready to launch, but the tube's jammed solid with debris from that last bay breach. I can try blasting it free with a plasma torch, but